Question number 9. Order. Order. Question number 9, Richard Prosser.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. To the Minister for Primary Industries, does he stand by all his statements?
Mr Speaker.
Honourable Joe Goodhue.
On behalf of the Minister, yes. In particular, I stand by my statement that MPI are doing a fantastic job on the ground in responding to the localised incursion of Queensland fruit fly. This morning there were around 180 field staff working on location in Auckland, with more staff coordinating aspects of the response from the Wellington head office. I also want to take this opportunity to thank members of the public for their patience and their cooperation.
Supplementary.
Supplementary question, Richard Prosser.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. To the Minister, does he stand by his statement, we have stepped up a very quick response to this detection of one Queensland fruit fly in Auckland at the moment? If so, was he expecting that more fruit flies would be detected?
Honourable Joe Goodhue.
Mr Speaker, on behalf of the Minister, yes, it is expected that there will often be, in the localised area, and that's why I referred to this as a localised incursion, that there will be further fruit flies detected. That is why we are looking to determine that they are within that area. Otherwise, the area that is being covered with this incursion response would be changed should there be any elsewhere. But this is entirely what we would expect.
Supplementary.
Supplementary question, Richard Prosser.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. To the Minister, does the Minister believe the continued use of the Green Lane direct fast exit pathway is wise, given his own department's assessment that, quote, fruit fly is most likely to arrive with plane passengers bringing in infested fruit and luggage?
Mr Speaker.
Honourable Joe Goodhue.
On behalf of the Minister, analysis shows us that the direct exit lane, or the Green Lane as it's known by passengers coming through, in fact has much higher level of compliance, sticking to the rules in other words, than the other tracks through the airport. We know that the MPI officers that are in touch with every passenger coming through, the use of dogs, the use of high-risk application of X-rays are all part of the way in which we put the taxpayers' money to good effect to detect and have the highest possibility of detecting any incursions. No biosecurity system is ever 100%, but we are focused very much on where the highest risk is.
Supplementary.
Supplementary question, Richard Prosser.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Can the Minister confirm that the MPI Pest and Diseases Hotline is only operational during business hours, so that if someone finds a Queensland fruit fly, they are encouraged to leave a message or call back on the next business day? If so, given that the number of fruit fly detected is now 5 and increasing, does he agree the hotline should be operated 24/7? And if not, why not?
Mr Speaker.
Honourable Joe Goodhue.
On behalf of the Minister, I have heard some claims to that effect. I can assure the member that the hotline, and we have an MPI, a pest line that operates 24/7, and then we have a further triage off to the Queensland fruit fly line, which is operated from early in the morning right into the evening. But what we are doing, again, in a thoughtful and measured response, is that every single call that comes in is triaged, and that the calls that represent the highest risk of new information are treated first. But I'm sure the member might not be surprised to hear that if somebody rings us from the West Coast, a place of the South Island, a place too cold for fruit flies, thinking they may have seen a fruit fly, that will be a little lower priority than someone in the next street over to where we've found other flies.
Supplementary.
Order, order, order. Supplementary question, Richard Prosser.
To the Minister, does the Minister believe that biosecurity risks are only active during business hours? And further to that, what can he tell the House regarding the potential activity of biosecurity risks on public holidays?
Order.
Mr.
Honourable
Speaker,
Joe Goodhue.
On behalf of the Minister, this from the member who thinks we should fumigate everything and everyone at the airport, in fact, is a ridiculous question. I've already answered the member, had he but listened. 24/7 for the pest line, careful triage of every call that comes in, and prioritisation for those that represent the information we need to deal with swiftly.
Supplementary.
Supplementary question, Richard Prosser.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Can the Minister tell the House which would be the greater amount, the cost of instituting 100% biosecurity inspection of all incoming passengers, luggage, mail and freight, or the cost of losing the 3/4 of New Zealand's economy that depends on primary production through not instituting such essential biosecurity measures?
Mr.
Honourable
Speaker,
Joe Goodhue.
on behalf of the member, on behalf of the Minister actually, the member seems to have missed the point. There are a number of ways in which we can have the biosecurity system that this country depends upon. X-rays are but one of those measures. X-raying high-risk entry through the border is the way we're operating at the moment. In addition, 100% screening of international arrivals using dogs currently. But the member also must remember that there are signs everywhere, that there is education, that we have an MPI officer speak to every passenger and realise that 100% X-ray screening is not a silver bullet.
Point of order, Mr. Speaker.
Point of order, Richard Prosser.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I listened very carefully to the Minister's answer. The question was very straightforward, Mr. Speaker. It was, can the Minister tell the House which would be the greater amount? That matter was not addressed.
Could the Minister just address that part of the question? Honourable Joe Goodhue.
Mr. Speaker, on behalf of the Minister, any biosecurity incursion represents a very great and many millions of dollars or more threat to this country. I believe that the money that is spent on biosecurity is well spent, but I would add for the member. We had 100% X-ray screening from 2000 to 2008. We also had Varroa, painted apple moth, Didymo and Asian gypsy moth. So maybe the member's mixing up what he's comparing.
Just mixed up.
Order. 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 Point of order, Chris Hipkins.
Point of order, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to ask you to consider something that's come up a number of times today during question time and a number of previous question times. And that is that increasingly we're seeing ministers at the beginning of their answer or during their answer attacking personally the person answering the question. Now, I accept that there is going to be an element of political exchange in question time, and a very political question will draw a very political answer. But where a member is asking relatively straight questions which don't attack the minister and don't actually have that political element in them, it's not inappropriate for the speaker perhaps to rule out of order an answer that begins with an attack on the questioner, because otherwise it's going to become a very one-sided question time if this practice is allowed to continue.
Yeah. Allow me to have a look at the point the member's making. If it is a blatant attack, I normally do rise to my feet and tell the minister answering the question that's not appropriate. Today there's been, as the member refers to in his point of order, the normal political exchange. I will go back and review Hansard. I don't think there's anything that's been out of order warranting my early intervention, but it is something that I appreciate the member raising, because the political barb at the start tends to then create more disorder to this House. Question number 10, the Honourable David Parker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question